sort of sell.
Okay.
Right?
All right, it's recording now. Okay.
All right. So what I say is, like, in the last 8 weeks, I've bought 4 houses.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was not paying attention to, because I've been in the market, so it's not like I'm not seeing it. I just wasn't paying attention. You can be experiencing something and not really paying attention to what's happening. But when you pay attention, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, it's in your face, right? So as you know, in the last downturn, 2008, 2009, that was caused not by a quote unquote overbuilding of houses. That was caused by too much easy, stupid capital, liar loans, low doc loans. No, and you and I were both in the business during that period of time. We had a front row seat, 2005, 2006. We're all scratching our heads going, how are these people who don't even have jobs?
Yeah, how are they shoving money at us? Yeah.
Right, getting 110% financing. I'll never forget, I did a half a block. The ones you sold me. You sold them to me, right?
Probably.
I did the half block. I did that half city block on McCullough Street.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Okay. Yep. And the last one I sold, we thought we were going to sell them for like 120, 130. The last one I sold for 158.
Yep.
I'll never forget the settlement. We went to the settlement, and the buyer was late. The buyer shows up in their brand new Beamer.
Oh no.
Talking about they just got back from Walmart buying big screen TVs to put on the wall. This 2005 or 2006.
Yeah.
And I'm scratching my head going, wait a minute. When I grew up as a kid and I got my real estate license, I got my real estate license when I was 21, 22 years old, when I was still a student at Taos University, because they offered the real estate class.
Yeah.
The whole storyline was, you're supposed to eat pork and beans for 4 years when you buy a piece of real estate, but it'll be worth it, right? You're supposed to scrape, sacrifice, give up all your savings, right? And here's this guy coming in here talking about driving a brand new Beamer, talking about he just got back from Walmart, and now he's coming to a settlement to buy his house. And everybody signs the paperwork. I get my check. Real estate agent gets his check. Other real estate agent, and I was actually agent on one side, so I get my check, right? And then the buyer gets a check.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the hell does that happen?
Dude, time and time again. You know, I'm sitting at the settlement table as the seller, and I'm thinking, like, I'm getting paid big money, and I'm like, all right, this is great. This is good for me. You know, I'll buy a house for 50 grand. I'll sell it for 120. That's a great day.
Mm-hmm.
Then they show up. They're paying me 120 grand, and they're walking from the table with 30 grand.
Right.
And I'm going,
what?
You got paid 30 grand to buy a house. I don't understand. But
I'm on the wrong side of this table, right?
Exactly. So, but I agree with you 100%. I actually was just teaching this last week, and I was like, people were like, well, that doesn't make sense. How are they going to package up all these loans that don't cash flow and sell them off to investors? At some point, they got to pay. And I'm like, yeah, or default. That's what happened.
Right. So what happened, that was in the fall of 2006.
Yeah.
And I said to myself right then and there, and I started telling all of my members of DC REIA, and I started telling all of my coaching students, you need to get out of the real estate game. Yeah. I said, I can't put my finger on it just yet, but there's something wrong with this market. And that was not my first market collapse. My first market collapse was when I got out of college in 1986, 1987. And I watched the commercial market implode back. So I've seen markets collapse before. Back in 87, I didn't know why. 2006, I'm understanding why. Well, what was happening was a lot of the Wall Street money, Blackstone and Lehman Brothers, they were raising these huge funds running around the world, not the country, but the world, telling people that low doc, no doc, what do they call them? What were the ones for the first-time home buyers?
Stated?
No, there was another name they gave for it. But fundamentally, it was people who would normally be perceived as very risky because they were first-time home buyers. And I can't remember what they called them. We called them liar loans, which were the no doc loans, but it was something else.
Prime,
subprime. Subprime. That was it.
Yeah.
Subprime.
Yeah.
They were running around the world telling the world institutional money, not the kind of money we talk about, but like hedge funds and sovereign wealth fund, like the Saudi government, right? Or the Norwegian government. They were telling them that subprime mortgages did not have a risk profile that was in line with the amount of interest they were going to get. In other words, they were saying, hey, on these subprime mortgages, you're going to get an 18-20% return, but they're not really that risky.
Like, they were relying on the risk reward wasn't accurate. Yeah.
Right. They were saying A quality loans are priced at 5, 6, 7%. Subprime loans are priced at 12%, but there's no way you're going to have as many defaults in subprime as it's going to be somewhat similar. So therefore, there's a mispricing. That's what they were telling everybody. There's a mispricing. So everybody started flooding institutional money, which by and large is stupid money, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how can that be? The Saudis are smart. No, it's not that the Saudis are smart. It's that they're so darn rich. Yeah. And when you have, you have trillions of dollars to put into a market, you allocate a certain percentage just for seemingly high risk, but not really high risk deals, right? Subprime mortgages. Yeah. Well, if you're the Saudi government and you got trillions of dollars, you can probably allocate $100 billion to your, hey, if we lose it all, it's not a big deal fund.
And not miss it. Yeah.
Right? So they put money in. And then once Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, well, Goldman wasn't really a player in there, but Lehman Brothers was a huge player in there. Once Lehman Brothers, then they run to the Norwegian government and say, hey, look what the Saudi government just did. Yep. The Norwegian government's like, well, okay, well, the Saudi government did it, we should do it too. But the difference is the Saudis have so much money that if they allocate $100 billion and lose it, they don't care. But if the Norwegian government puts in $10 billion, right? Or what was the country that actually was it Iceland, Greenland or Iceland? There was one country that put almost their whole public employee retirement fund into these, and the whole thing went bust. Yeah. And it wiped out their entire fund, right? Yeah. And Lehman Brothers was the one that was packaging this doggy doo-doo and saying it was okay. And then it's like, okay, now that we've raised this money, and of course on Wall Street, you don't make money because you actually make money. You make money from raising money, right? You know this,
That's
right?
It. Yeah.
So they had raised hundreds of billions of dollars and collected billions of dollars in fees, right? Yeah. It's always a percentage, right? If I raise 100 billion, I make $1 billion, right? It's 1%. Who cares, right? So they raise hundreds of billions of dollars now, so they got to put it somewhere. So what do they do with it? They give it to Angelo Mazzillo and Countrywide. Remember him?
Yes, my first home loan was with Countrywide. Yes, it was.
And Angelo says, I'm gonna do for mortgages what Sears did for Craftsman Tools. We're gonna have a mortgage shop on every corner.
Yep.
And so Countrywide Mortgage literally opened up. They actually even opened up more Countrywide stores than there were banks. Hard to believe. I mean, there were as many Countrywide stores as there were, Safeway and giant grocery stores.
I went in them. I've been in them. I signed my first loan docs in one of those buildings. Yeah.
And like, what was their purpose? Like, who goes in a mortgage store? What do you go to a mortgage store for? It's not like going to Giant to get a jar of peanut butter. You go to a mortgage store to get a mortgage.
Well, they were giving out mortgages just like peanut butter, though. I mean, that's the thing. They're like, take the money, take it.
If you got that much money in that many stores, you have no choice other than to pump that money into the economy.
You got to.
You got to do it. That's what we do.
We all do the exact same thing. At least I know I do. When you have a bunch of money coming in, you don't pay as close attention to that expense ratio, right? You're like, whatever. I got another 60 grand coming in next month, whatever. So, but then when you don't have that 60 grand coming in, you're like, wait, do I really need all those expenses? You know what I mean? Kind of like cutting it back. Well, so the Saudi Arabian government, that was a great example because when you got a lot of money, you don't pay attention as you would if you don't have a lot of money coming in. And so they were just shelling out the money.
Well, Countrywide managed to do two things, and they didn't do it alone. They managed to convince everybody that rather than going to Household Finance, HFC, which also had stores, and getting essentially a payday loan, right? Yep. Rather than going to Household Finance and getting a loan on the title of your car, why not just refi your house, right? Why not just do a HELOC or a refi? Because the terms are longer and the interest rate is cheaper. And therefore, if you need an extra 50, 60, 100 grand, hey, if you even need 5,000, rather than going to Household Finance or Bank of America, come to us and we'll either give you a HELOC or a credit card tied to a HELOC.
Yep.
We'll give you the same amount of money for half the rate, and we'll give you 20 years to pay it back. That was number one. Second thing they did was, with all this money coming in from Lehman Brothers, they changed the underwriting terms of who qualified for mortgage. So all of a sudden, people who normally wouldn't even think about getting mortgage, like people who were scraping by every month, barely getting together enough month to pay the rent, now all of a sudden qualified for mortgage. And it wasn't just the quote unquote dumbing down of loans. It was like, you don't have to have a 750 FICO. We'll give you a loan with a 550 FICO. Heck, we even have special loan categories. You got a 450 FICO. Last time I checked, I think 450 is almost near the bottom. 450 means every month you got 10 bills to pay. You intentionally don't pay 9 of them, right? Right. So
that's what that means.
Right. Yeah. So and if you remember, I mean, I know you're younger than me, but when I got my real estate license back in 1983. That's when I got my real estate license. I went to back then it wasn't a 60-hour class, it was a 20-hour class. We were told over and over and over again, don't take on clients who need to spend more than 25% of their income on the mortgage. 25%.
That's right. I remember that.
Right? Then 25 became 33.
Yep.
And in the height before the crash, it was 50%.
Yeah, exactly.
You could allocate up to 50% of your set. Like, who does that? Right? Yeah. And so as a result, that symbiotic relationship, that cabal, if I could use that term, if I'm using it correctly, of Countrywide, Lehman Brothers, and then the third piece was, it started with Bill Clinton, it continued with George Bush, and then Obama was actually adamantly opposed. And you and I know this because of, again, how long we've been in the business and associated with the business. Bill Clinton said, a house for everybody.
Yep.
Right? Home ownership for everyone.
Yep.
Bush comes in and he double downs on it.
Yep.
In fact, at one point, and I worked at HUD for a little bit. I got a lot of buddies at HUD. They were all down in the mouth at HUD because Bush was basically gutting all the programs for loan assistance and multifamily and putting all those resources into single family home ownership.
Exactly.
So you had this troika, right? Cabal, troika, right? Whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lehman Brothers.
US government was pushing demand.
Yeah, Lehman Brothers raising the money.
Yep.
Countrywide putting the money out, and policy-wise, the Bush administration saying everybody who wants a house should get a house. And we took home ownership that is historically hovers somewhere between 54 to like 56% in America. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes lower. We pushed home ownership, according to some studies, up to 70%.
Yeah.
So how do you push home ownership up 20 points? Right, or 14, whatever.
Free
right?
money.
You literally take people off the street and say, "Do you want a house?"
Exactly.
And they're like, "I don't know if I can afford a house." Oh, well, if I give you the money, you can afford it. Yeah, let's do it, right? And that's what happened, right?
Like, can you pay it back? I don't know.
and that started like around. I want to say that started around 2000-ish, maybe 2000, 2001. We were sort of coming out of recession. But by the time we got to 2000, actually started, no, I'm sorry, so like 1999, right? But by the time we got to 2005, we had been in a full-on 5-year recovery in the housing market. And again, those of us who've been around housing know well enough. If you're in the 5th year of a sort of bull housing market, you're probably coming to the end. And
you're at the pinnacle.
If you remember, many of us were looking in 2005, 2000, like this, it can't keep on going. It can't keep on going. Well, it kept on going.
It kept going for another 2 years.
But the reason it kept going was not because the housing industry was quote unquote open. It was because the money industry was pumping so much money.
There was so much steroids that it was just.
And it was a whole new category of buyer that just never existed in the past. If you look through all of American history, all of American home ownership, at no point in time have we ever hit 70-some% home ownership. And fundamentally what we did was we took a whole class of people who had no business owning homes and gave them relatively cheap money in abundant supply, right, to just go out and buy a house. But the guy I sold that house to over on McCullough Street, the last one, when we did that whole city block, he never made a single payment.
Exactly. So you said something important there. You said, a whole new category of buyers that didn't exist. Literally didn't exist.
Exactly. So what happened? And I talked about this in the summer of 2007. There is this newspaper. I don't know why I don't subscribe to it. I don't know why I don't read it more often, but I kind of read it like once every 10 years. And when I read it, I usually pick up a really good idea. So shame on me for not subscribing, but it's called Barron's. It was a sister publication to the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. So Wall Street Journal comes out Monday through Friday. In the past, the Wall Street Journal never published on the weekends. And the owners at the time of the Wall Street Journal would publish this they called it a magazine, but it was more like an overblown tabloid paper. And they would publish it printed on Fridays. And it was sort of the weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal, right? But they didn't want to call it that, so they called it Barron's. And there was an article in Barron's in April or May of 2007 that I saw, and again, I saw it at the grocery store. I picked it up and I read it, and I'm like, oh shucks, that's what's happening. So remember I said, when we went to the settlement in the fall 2006 and the guy got a check, and I didn't know what was going on, but I started telling people, you need to be a little concerned about this market. I didn't know what was going on. I realized what was going on when I read that Barron's article. And what it said was that the subprime mortgage industry was in serious trouble. And that the subprime mortgage industry had reported that in the first quarter of 2007, so the first quarter ends March, they're now reporting in April. This article came out in like early May, late April. And what it said was that 100% of all the subprime loans that had been originated in the first quarter of 2007 were in default. 100, in other words, everybody in the pool. And I was like, oh, we got a problem. Hey, Houston, we got a problem.
So,
and I remember going to a club meeting in June or July. I'm pretty sure it was July of 2007, where I stood up in front of a crowd of 600 people at Florian Hall. And I said, everybody in here who considers themselves a real estate investor, you need to get the hell out of real estate. Real estate is going to collapse. So, and I predicted at the time it would happen in the fall of 2007. Again, and what was driving my decision making, once I read the article and I did my own research, I'm like, holy crap, the entire subprime mortgage industry is about to implode. Yeah. And for the most part, a good chunk of all the houses that were being built and sold in the fall of 2000, in the fall 2006 to the winter 2007 and spring, they were all for the most part being sold to this new category of buyers, the subprime buyers, or the liar loan, or the low doc loans. Yeah. And where I missed the mark was two things. Number one was I was right about what was going to happen. What I was wrong about the timing. The total collapse didn't happen for another year, which was very shocking to me and everybody else. But number two, where I really missed the mark was I didn't figure out how to make money off of this. Mm-hmm. So you know me, I always read an article. I always go, well, okay, how do I make money off it? I didn't ask myself the question. Like, okay, if it really is going to collapse, don't just tell people to get out. Figure out what to do next to take advantage of it. And I didn't do that. And you ever see that movie, The Big Short?
Yeah.
So I'm like, why wasn't I that guy? He saw it coming. He made money.
And I forgot what year it was. I think it was 2007. I was speaking with my mortgage broker, and I said to him, hey, and this, I didn't know anything about stocks yet. I'd only done real estate. I didn't know anything about stocks. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about shorting these mortgage companies because this can't last. And his response to me was, why would you want to do that?
Right. Who would bet against Angelo Mazzillo and Countrywide back then? Exactly. Not knowing that 12 months later they would be bankrupt and the guy was facing jail time.
And the reason why I came to that
possibility of jail time.
The reason why I came to the conclusion was because I looked at my own personal scenario, being a small business owner. A couple years back, I was subprime, got a subprime mortgage.
Right.
Went to buy another house. Now nothing had changed. I hadn't done anything different, right?
Right.
My business may have been doing a little bit better, but nothing had changed. Went to apply for another mortgage to buy a house, and I got like 300% more money. And I'm going, something's not
Right.
going right.
Right. It's like you're taking the money and you're putting it in.
At it. And I'm like,
you're taking the money and you're putting it in a Swiss bank account because, like, when these guys realize they shouldn't have given me the money, and start asking for it back, I better hide it.
So I started looking at it, and I'm like, okay, this isn't good. So something's happening. If they're giving out this much, if they're going to give a dude like me that much money, okay,
right.
something's going down. So I started buying houses, right? Knowing this, I started buying houses with other people's money. So I had zero of my own money in there. But what I did was, and I know you know this, but I know a lot of people out there don't. I actually took all the zip codes in Baltimore City and I calculated a growth rate, right? Okay. And so what I would do is I would look and say, okay, say the growth rate was 10%. Okay. Mm-hmm. I would look at the market value of a property and say it was 100,000.
Right.
And the growth rate was 10%. So I would find off the market deals and buy them for at least less than the growth rate of the market, right? So I would buy $100,000 house for $90,000.
Right.
I would then put it on the market for plus the growth rate. So I'd put it on the market for 110. Right. So I would keep that 20 grand is the deal profit, right?
Nice.
So we were buying 30 houses a month, me and Nina.
Right.
And we were literally buying like 30. I think 1 month we bought 45 houses was our biggest month. And we had so many people giving us money. Like, hey, you guys are paying 14% interest on the back end?
Right.
Here.
Sweet.
We had more money than deals. But like you said with Lehman, you got to put it out in the street, right? Because I'm paying that interest. And if that's not making me money, I'm losing time, I'm losing money. But what happened, I started noticing the timeline that it took us to get that return was growing.
Yes.
So I'm like, this market's starting to cool down.
Mm-hmm.
Liquidate everything.
Right.
We stopped taking people's money.
Yep.
We sold everything.
Yep.
We got caught with we owned an entire city block in Southwest Baltimore. We had a hard money loan on that for like $500,000. We got caught on that one, but we ended up selling that development to Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, nice.
And they said, Scott, look, we love the project. We love what you guys are doing here, but the way we receive our money, you can't make a profit. Because we got donations.
You leg out of the bear trap. Who cares?
And I'm like, wait, but I can give my hard money lender his money back. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, do it.
There you go. Yeah.
And the funny thing is had that hard money lender not have given me and Nina that $500,000, he would have lost it in the stock market because the stock market tanked. He lucked out, man. I was kind of like,
we all have that sort of one bad deal if we're lucky. And you were smart enough to walk away even. I had one bad deal that actually cost me money. And it was because I had a chance to get out at par and I got greedy. And because I got greedy and said, no, I'm not going to just walk away from this deal. I'm just going to get it refied. So my original hard money lender got made whole, right? Where he was willing to do a deed in lieu and not even having hit my credit. He's like, just give me the keys. I'll take care of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I'll get another lender. So I got another lender to come in and ultimately wind up defaulting on that lender and lost about $70,000, $80,000 on the deal.
Yeah.
Because I got greedy and 12 months later, the market was way worse than what it was at the time, right? Sometimes you just think you're blessed. And I remember saying to my wife one time about 2010, 2011, in the height of the recession. And she was like, I just feel like we're not getting anywhere. We're working twice as hard and we're not taking as many vacations. I said, honey, do you realize that half our friends have filed for bankruptcy? Sometimes just staying even is getting ahead.
Exactly.
Right? Let's update the story. So 2008, the market does finally collapse.
Yes.
And one of the things about mass media, which people need to understand, is the mass media tells half truths.
Sure.
Right? And I'm not saying it's by design, although in some cases it is by design. Yeah. But they don't do enough research to tell anything other than half truth, which means they're telling 100% lie.
Right.
The mass media convince the American public that the reason why we had the economic downturn in 2008, 2009 was because of the housing market.
That's
and
right.
the housing market collapsed. That's not true.
Brokers pushing the houses.
Right, exactly. That's not true. What happened was there was a significant group on Wall Street that was fueling the housing market through subprime, liar loans, low doc loans, and they were pumping so much money into housing. And that group was led by Lehman Brothers and led by Countrywide, and had the backing of several members of Congress and the Bush administration. But there were other players in that space, many of whom, quite frankly, came late to the space. They saw what Lehman Brothers was doing, and they got greedy, like, well, how do we get it on? So even Goldman Sachs had a little piece of it. Everybody on Wall Street had a little piece of that action, even though Lehman was the biggest culprit. Well, long story short, when that market imploded completely, 2008, 2009, when the federal government bailed out Wall Street, 2008, 2009, you still had players in that space saying, what are we going to do next? And what emerged 2009, 2010 was an opportunity to buy these portfolios of houses, because so many of those people who never should have owned houses in the first place, so many of these people who got liar loans, low doc loans, subprime mortgages, who never even bothered to make a mortgage payment, so many of these people who never made a payment, and that's what was reported in Barron's in early 2007, and then 2007, 2008, by the time 2010 rolls around, you got a whole glut of foreclosures on the market.
Yeah.
And a lot of those same Wall Street players, other than Lehman Brothers, who went bankrupt and got scattered to the four corners of the wind. But hey, even the people who worked at Lehman, the partners at Lehman, went to some other Wall Street institution and got a job, right?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, and even some of those former Lehman guys went to an outfit called BlackRock, right? Right? And they're like, well, you know what? Maybe we can make some money buying these bad pieces of paper. Like, we created them. Now let's go back and buy it, right? So now, and because money, oftentimes institutional money can be really stupid, they raise huge sums of money to buy bad paper, busted deals, and REOs themselves. But at the end of the day, the commonality was there was a single family house that if you were patient enough and tenacious enough, you could get your hands on the house. And now all of a sudden, you own houses.
Right.
And up until that point in time, nobody on Wall Street ever really thought about owning single family houses. It had really never been done in a big way. But then Warren Buffett had that famous interview with Becky Quick. I don't remember what the date was, but you can Google it and find it. Becky Quick, and I think at the time she was still at CNBC. I think she since left and went to Fox Financial Channel or something. There was a very famous interview between Warren Buffett and Becky Quick. And Warren Buffett said, you know, of all the things I'm looking at right now, if I could figure out a way to buy single family houses, I would buy as many as I can get my hands on.
Yeah, I remember that.
And everybody was posting that on Facebook and YouTube. Well, guess what? The smart money, or so-called smart money on Wall Street, was sitting there going, there's got to be a way we can go. They heard that interview and said, you know what? Warren Buffett's right. Let's do it. And that gave the legitimacy for Wall Street to go full on buying single family houses. And from 2010, 2011, 2012, up until maybe 2013, 2014, the number one thing that group of people was doing was what they called bulk single family residential purchases. And they bought huge portfolios of single family houses, right? Continue. Now, 2014, 2015, 2016, the US economy all across the board is in full on recovery. And now Wall Street's like, maybe we ought to cut back on buying these single family houses, and maybe we ought to go back to what we really know, quite frankly, which is making loans. Right, selling money, making loans, right? So where can we get into the making loans that's based on houses, because now we're more comfortable with houses, but we can get a higher rate of return versus the 3 or 4, 5, 6% that Fannie Freddie is willing to pay, right? Oh, hard money lending. And this gets right back to the question you asked me of what are you looking at right now? So one of the things that I kind of knew was happening but wasn't really paying attention to is that over the past several years, really since the last recession, hard money lending has gone from a cottage industry to a Wall Street backed industry. When we were in our heyday, 2005, 2006, borrowing money from hard money lenders, there was no such thing as a hard money bankers.
Yeah.
The only quote unquote nationwide hard money lender was AJ Fernaro and Brookview Financial, and even he didn't go nationwide, right?
Yeah.
We went to guys like Rex Frost.
Yeah.
Right?
Rex Frost. That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
God rest his soul, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Quirky guys, right? Quirky guys who, if you called their house at 9 o'clock, before 9 o'clock in the morning, somebody would literally answer the phone and say, "We're not open yet." Click.
Yeah.
I swear to God.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not open yet. Call back at 9. Click. I was like, what do you mean? It's 8:45. You just answer the phone, right? And if you call back at 9:15, you get an answer machine that goes, "The office is closed now. Please call back tomorrow at 9 o'clock."
Yeah.
Rex worked for like maybe 15, 20 minutes a day.
Yep.
He would tell you know, he would do things like, okay, what are the draws I got to pay on today? Who wants to borrow money from me today? And he had like a little 15, 20-minute window he would work, and then he'd go off and have fun. And if you were doing business with Rex, he'd send you over to Debbie Ingram and the folks over Brennan and Essex.
Oh, yeah,
right?
That
and
little
they did all the paperwork.
Building. Yep.
Right. Right. And even though Rex was just one guy, the whole hard money industry was kind of like Rex Frost. It was this cottage industry where, that old adage of he who holds the goal makes the rules.
Yeah,
right?
Now there's Wall Street bankers that fund all the hard money lenders.
Right.
Yep.
Today, in 2020, it's the same guys who used to work at Lehman Brothers. It's the same guys who sat out buying single family houses until that wasn't profitable. They now all of a sudden, and I don't know whether it happened in 2015, 2016, but I know I started paying more and more attention to, like, where are all these hard money lenders coming from? 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. And for the most part, most people who are out there doing hard money loans today, it's not their money. They're brokering Wall Street's money, right?
That's right. That's exactly what they're doing.
And so what we saw happen in March of this year, right? If you were actively buying houses and borrowing money from hard money lenders in March this year, what you saw happen was that entire sector of the market stopped lending.
Stop. Yep.
Totally stopped. And I suspect the reason why is because, knowing what those guys' history was, they were probably looking at this whole pandemic and saying, you know what, are we better off making loans at 14, 15%, right? Through this patchwork network of little local guys across the country who were basically loan brokers, right? Not loan. They're not loan originators. They're loan brokers who are brokering. Are we better off supplying them, or are we better off keeping our cash on the sidelines and going back to what we did in 2008, 2009, 2010, which is buying portfolios of busted deals? And the entire industry for about 3 weeks froze up, totally shut down, and a lot of newbie investors who were borrowing hard money were told no. And a lot of in March and April of 2020.
Yep.
And to some degree, even May. And a lot of experienced investors who were still working with hard money and not working with like lines of credit from banks and stuff, they were told, we'll fund you, but while you're normally used to getting deals where we fund 90% of the deal, we'll only fund 75 or 80% of the deal. Yep. In other words, we will fund 75% of the acquisition and none of the rehab, right?
Yeah.
Which is a dramatic change from January of this year, which was, we'll fund 100% of the rehab and you just got to bring 10% of the purchase price to the table.
Yeah.
As long as it pencils. So interesting thing is the money got cut off, but if you were actively in the market, or you notice appraisals didn't get compressed. You notice traditional purchases, first time home, that didn't stop. In fact, it didn't even slow down.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's taken off. That's kind of what that's how we started this whole conversation is this going to continue? Is this residential boom on traditional residential going to continue?
And days on market didn't change. Now, what's happening? And if you're not a student of this business, you can totally miss this.
Yeah.
And even if you're in the business but you're not paying attention, you can miss this, right? So let's go back and do a quick history lesson, and then I can talk about where I think the market is headed.
Yeah.
What happened 2008, 2009, 2010? It happened to you. It happened to me. It happened to all of us.
Yep.
Everybody who was in trouble said, Mom, can I move home?
Yep, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And even people who were not in trouble said, hey, would it be okay if I stayed with you for a while? Because I think I want to give up my expensive apartment.
That's right.
So both of our adult children moved back home, right? Dave was too young. He was in middle school and then high school. But Yasmin, who had been living in Philly, she gave up her apartment. She came home.
Yep.
Gregory, who had been in college and now thinking about, or went from college to trade school, and now thinking about, well, maybe I'll get my own place. He came back home. And we had everybody living under one roof for about 2-3 years.
Yep.
Right? And the big story back in 2010, 2011 in the DC area, and again, DC is way more recession proof than the rest of the country. So we're always about 18 to 36 months ahead of the rest of the country, right?
Yeah.
So the big story around here was, when are people going to stop mooching off their parents, right? When are they going to move out of their parents' basement? Wasn't that the big knock on Bernie Sanders voters in 26? Like, when are they going to move out of their parents' basement and go get their own place, right?
Yeah.
And so we didn't see a lot of activity in terms of either apartments or home sales. But then a very interesting trend started to emerge around 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, again, depending upon what part of the country you're in. Millennials, who to some degree mirror the baby boomers, right? And if anybody has paid attention to the story of the baby boomers over the decades, they realize how baby boomers changed everything starting in the 1950s, right? Including home ownership, right?
Yeah.
Millennials, which, oh, by the way, is an even bigger group than baby boomers. So they have the potential to swing the pendulum much further and much harder, right? They opted to go downtown. They opted to go to urban environments, and they opted to rent, not buy.
That's right.
So for the most part, since we started coming out of the housing recession, call it 2010 in the DC area, call it 2012, 2013, 2014 for the rest of the country, ever since we started coming out of the housing recession, that was not fueled by millennials. That was predominantly baby boomer empty nesters. And unfortunately, but true, the statistics show that if you are married and with kids, somewhere around the time the kids go to high school, you're going to get divorced. 50% of all marriages end in divorce, at which point it's oftentimes economically infeasible for one of the spouses to stay in the house. So what do? They sell the house, they move to a condo. Where do they move the condo? Either urban or urban-like, right?
Yep.
Reston, downtown Annapolis, right? I had my big house in Anne Arundel County. Now I want to get my 2-bedroom condo because I want to keep some select pieces of furniture, but everything else can be given to the kids. But I want to be in the middle of it, but I don't want to be in the hood, right? So I can go to Annapolis Town Center and buy myself a condo for $450,000, $500,000, right? Sell the house that I bought when I married my husband, right? Back in 1970, 80, whatever, right? We got divorced 4 years ago, right after the last kid went off to college, right? And so now we've sold the house for $1 million. We paid $200,000. We sold it for $1 million 15, 18 years later. And I'm going to pocket my half. He's going to pocket his half. And I'm going to take my half and go buy a condo in the Annapolis Town Center. Now, again, gross oversimplification.
Sure.
But that trend is happening all across the country, whether it's Annapolis Town Center, Reston Town Center, the condos in Washington, D.C., over on 14th and U, right? Over and over and over again. And the millennials, for the most part, were renting and going to urban environment. They were not interested in they were not interested in the Disney version.
No, right.
U Street. They wanted to be on U Street.
Right.
With the gun pops up the street and all, right?
Right.
So now here we are in 2020, and what's happening? Well, a lot of the people who are renting apartments, and as I shared with you, my oldest son, who's now 27, he suddenly decided, why should I pay $3,800 for me and my girlfriend to live in a 2-bedroom apartment in DC, 2 blocks away from Rhode Island Metro, when we can go buy a house in Laurel with a pool, get 2 times to 3 times as much space, and the mortgage payment's only $2,800, not $3,800 in rent. I can buy my own house, I can have my own pool, and I can have $1,000 extra in my pocket every month to go spend on something else. Yes, now I have the responsibilities of home ownership. Yes, now I got to cut the grass in the summer and paint the trim and get the leaf. But for that next phase of his life, the 30 to 40 somethings, that's where he wants to be.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of where we headed, I think the pendulum for the back to the city movement has gone as far as it's going to go. And now it's potentially going to start swinging back in the other direction. And I think we're going to start to see a trend of millennials. And as I mentioned before, Annabon Basu says the single largest cohort of Americans today are 27 years old. The second largest cohort of Americans is, I think he said 65 or 68. And the third largest cohort is 28.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
And here, looking at the business climate, because, you know, I pretty much only do commercial real estate. So looking at the business climate, looking at all the businesses that are closing or are shuttering.
Yeah.
And without the government pumping stimulus, likelihood of them surviving is going to be next to nothing.
Yeah.
Looking at that, looking at the interest rates for the home ownerships being extremely low.
Yep.
My concern with all the real estate purchase activity and the home ownership aspect is if those companies close down and those interest rates jump, where does that leave Harry homeowner?
Well, all right, let's talk about let's dissect each piece of it. And let's start with interest rates. What are interest rates today, both Fed funds and first-time home buyer and extrapolate investor? Where are those numbers today?
What, 3.5, 4?
In places we've never seen in our lifetime.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You and I have never ever, like Fed funds rate, if the Fed funds rate isn't 0, it's like 0.5%.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
First-time home buyer loans are now 2.7 to 3.5, depending on your FICO score.
Yeah.
And if you add another 100 to 150 basis points, if you add another 1 to 1.5% for investors,
yeah,
that puts you at 4.5 to 5. Do you ever remember as an investor being able to qualify for a 30-year home loan as an investor at 5%?
No.
I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I was weaned on 18% for homeowners.
Yeah.
when I bought my very first house in Old Town Alexandria, our mortgage was 14.9% as a first-time home buyer with decent credit.
You were happy to get it.
9, and I was happy to get it, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
and of course, what happens as interest rates trend down? Like if nothing else changes, as interest rate trends down, you can borrow more money, which means values go up.
Yep.
Right. So as far as interest rates go, I don't see interest rates going back to anything significant. Call it 7-8% for a home buyer, 8-9-10% for an investor. Fed funds rate being in the 6, 5s, and 6. I don't see that happening anytime in the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. You don't go from 0.5% to 5% anytime. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen quickly. In order for that,
it's not an overnight scenario. Yeah.
Yeah. In order for that to happen quickly, there's got to be inflation. And even when Paul Volcker, see now I'm really showing my age, right? Yeah. Even when Ronald Reagan appointed Paul Volcker as the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and said get inflation under control. This was after Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, when inflation became a huge problem under Nixon, got worse under Ford, started to get under control under Carter, but not really. But it was really Reagan who got inflation under control. How did he do it? He appointed Paul Volcker. Yeah. And Paul Volcker raised interest rates, but Paul Volcker only raised interest rates by like 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
Normally raising interest rates like by 2 or 3 is enough to shut down an economy.
Yeah, because if you were at 8 and now you're at, from a jump from 8 to 11 is a huge jump.
Absolutely.
But a jump from 0.5 to 3, you're 3? Like, okay.
Right? So and again, it's not just like federal funds rate only impacts short-term loans, HELOCs, and credit cards. But it's usually long-term treasuries, right? It's usually 10-year, 20-year treasuries. Okay, so who influences that? That's how much the U.S. is in debt, and then we turn around and go back and borrow it from China. So you do have to pay attention to that, but even that's at historic lows, right? Yeah. So I just don't see interest rates rising to the point that the interest rate is going to be the critical concern for real estate investors. And quite frankly, even when interest rates for regular home mortgages were in the 14, 15%, investors found creative ways through lease options, sub-to, takeover pay.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
we always find creative ways to get deals done, even when money's an issue. Money's not an issue.
Right. Money is not the issue.
That is not, and it will not be the issue
Yeah.
for the foreseeable future, meaning 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. There's no way I see us going from the interest rates we are now to getting into that sort of critical phase, which is 10%. To me, everything in the real estate world really starts to teeter
at 10.
I'm sorry, I said everything. Everything in the traditional real estate world.
Yeah.
Right. And we as investors can't lose sight of the fact that it's the traditional real estate world that really influences what we do. Right.
That's
when
right. That's our back end buyer.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. So we have to pay attention to that world, but that doesn't mean we necessarily play completely in that world.
Yeah.
That world doesn't shut down until interest rates start moving for them
at 10
past 9%.
Yeah.
It really gets critical at 10, and then it really starts to fall apart when you start getting into 12, 11%. Right. Yep. I don't know how you get there on the interest rate side. Right. I don't see how we get there. Right?
Outside of hyperinflation.
But you gotta have several years of hyperinflation.
Yeah.
What causes hyperinflation? Job demand.
Yep.
When the job market is so tight that we have to outbid for workers, and we're not quite willing to pay as much, but we're still pumping up rent prices, we're still pumping up food prices, we're still pumping up fuel prices. Again, those are the things that are a lot harder to predict in your crystal ball. That's why I listen to guys like Anibon Basu. Those guys like follow that stuff for a living. But do you see employers having to overpay for employees being a problem anytime soon? What's the unemployment rate in the country right now?
Well, right now the unemployment rate is pretty high.
And we have more and more employers.
Here's what I would
laying
say.
People off, right? Because they're like, okay, this COVID thing is going to go longer, and the recovery is going to take a lot longer.
Right.
So
exactly. So
every industry.
The COVID reality to unemployment is kind of scary because the short answer is, are employers going to have to overpay to get employees? The traditional mindset says no, they can actually probably pay less and get that job filled because of the unemployment rate. Right. But they're competing against unemployment stimulus.
Yeah, but sooner or later that runs out.
That runs out tomorrow. It runs out tomorrow. Like, right. I mean, literally.
And quite frankly, even when Congress gets its act together and reauthorize it, it will not be nearly as generous.
No.
Right. And I got to tell you, I more and more believe that I am an independent. You know, I used to call myself a Republican. I'm still registered that way, right? I've never been a left-leaning, you know me long enough, like, right. You ain't gonna see no crazy socialist, but you're not gonna see any crazy fascist either. I'm trying to write down.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm right down in the center. Yep.
I think this notion of people don't want to go back to work because they're getting too much money from the government, that's kind of a conservative lie, right? I don't know about you, but in one point in time in my life, I had to file for unemployment. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not as embarrassing today as it was. But, I worked in Virginia and got laid off twice in an 8-month period. I did not file for unemployment the first time, but the second time I didn't have much of a choice. And I remember going to that unemployment line, and not only was it embarrassing, but when they finally gave me my check, and it was like not even a third of my wages, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
No, that's it. And I think I got like 14 weeks of it. I'm like, it actually wasn't even 14 weeks. It might have been like 8 weeks. I'm like, if this is the alternative, I will find me a way. Agreed.
And I totally agree with you. So that's what I'm saying. Traditionally, 100%. Yeah. The employer can probably save money on employee costs.
Yeah.
However, because of the economic stimulus for unemployment, where it's like, if you were making $400 a week working a retail job and you got laid off because of COVID, and now you're making $750 a week because of that economic stimulus, and they say, hey, we can hire you back.
I think,
and you're like,
and forgive me if I hurt anybody's feelings, but get over it. Yeah. Maybe I'm becoming more of a libertarian. Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. The person who was working at a restaurant and reporting on their taxes that they were making $500 a week was making $1,500 a week. And there was I'm telling you, there's $1,000 in tips that never got reported.
In that regard, I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And the fact that the government gave them back $700 of their own damn money, right? Right? And now somebody's going, well, look, he's getting $700. Why would he go back to work for a job? He wasn't making $650. He was making $1,500. Of course he wants to go. Of course he wants to go back to work, but they don't want to. They don't want to risk their health.
Right.
Right. So I guess I'm more of a libertarian because I'm like, you know what? Give people their own money. I would rather the government give you your own money and you decide how to spend it than have some stupid trickle down programs.
How about just let me keep it? Like, how about just keep my own money and I'll take care of myself? How about that?
Okay, exactly. But here's my point. The fact that somebody's getting a quote unquote government stipend temporarily.
Yeah.
In no way do I believe that whatever amount of money they're getting from the is 100% replacing what they were probably able to make at a real job.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm not so quick to buy in this notion that we are disincentivizing people to go back to work.
Yeah.
Right. And again, to some degree, what we are witnessing now is free market in action. In March of this year, the governments, not the federal government, but state governments told us, stay home.
Yep.
Andrew Cuomo told folks in New York. Larry Hogan told folks in Maryland.
Yep.
Republican governor, Democratic governor, stay home. And everybody down south went crazy.
Yep.
How dare those governors tell restaurants to close, people to, it better not come down here because we won't do it. We won't do it. What people in Arizona say, we won't do it. People in Texas, we won't do it. Right? Okay, great. Yep. So then somewhere around maybe April, May-ish, you probably noticed, I noticed, right? Because we're here in Maryland. Hogan really backed off.
Yeah.
So, okay, we got it under control.
Yeah.
Here's some guidelines, but we're not going to tell you what to do. Yeah. Okay, government's off our back. What happened in Arizona? What happened in Florida? What happened in Oklahoma?
Yep.
They refused to believe that this was anything other than a hoax. Now, where are they now?
Yep. Now they're in spiking COVID cases.
And despite the governor of Georgia telling local municipalities, you can't mandate face masks, what are people doing all over the place?
Yep.
Herman Cain died. Herman Cain went to a Trump rally and got coronavirus and died. It's a hoax.
Did he die?
Dead. The man is dead.
The one he just ran for president?
Herman Cain, no mask in Oklahoma at the Trump rally because coronavirus is a hoax, died of the coronavirus. He's dead.
No
dead.
way.
Hello. So my point. So what's my point in all that? From a libertarian, let the free market to the virus itself is telling people, you better wear a darn mask, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And now restaurants are saying we have to close because all that stuff they did up in Maryland, all this stuff they did up in New York, now we have to do it because our patrons aren't coming out to frequent us because they're afraid they're gonna die, right?
Yeah.
So what's my whole point on it? All right, back to real estate. I don't see interest rates really going anywhere. I don't see a lot of pressure on inflation. And again, inflation is one of those things that there's a whole lot more variables but the biggest one is employment numbers. I just don't see a tight employment market anytime soon for all the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The virus itself is driving the economy and people's response to people's human innate need for self-preservation, need for survival, that is driving their decision-making as to whether they will go someplace or not go someplace. And as more and more people who said coronavirus is a hoax drop dead from coronavirus, and more people talk, big thing on Facebook a couple months ago was, do you know anybody who's died from coronavirus? And a handful of people in the North said, yeah, I do know somebody who got sick or died. And I remember responding, yeah, my neighbors, my relatives over in London. Yeah, but anybody you really know? Okay, now more and more about, oh, yeah, that's somebody I know. That
Right,
guy
yeah, I know several. Yeah.
You know, Bernie Dorfman and Herman Cain, and are you kidding me? Right. So here's my point. I just don't see how the U.S. economy just bounces back to 2019, January, February 2020 levels anytime in the next couple of years. And you and I were talking about this earlier. Like the demand, the pressure and the demand for commercial space is not going to be there. Nope. The pressure and demand for retail. Oh my God, poor retail. I mean, unless your name is Bezos, forget about it. You know, I drive by the Bowie Center. I don't actually get out and go to the Bowie Center. You know, I went there once in the last 4 or 5 months.
I wore a mask the other day and walked into the Harford County Mall because I wanted to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
Dude, it was a ghost town.
You take any pictures? If you do it again, take some pictures. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. I was kind of like scared. I was like, where, like, it was like, no, there's like a couple shops open,
right? Maybe
a couple patrons. It was like not there. My first thought is, there's no way this is sustainable. There's no way.
It's not.
No way.
You know, hotels. Who's traveling? Who's going to hotels?
Yeah.
Don't tell me what BWI shopping is going to look like a year from now.
Right.
Right. So again, unless you are an online merchant delivering stuff to the door with contactless delivery, you know, I used to laugh when I would get the little ads for Amazon. I used to go to Amazon and order something from Amazon maybe 2 times a year.
Yeah, I was never a big Amazon dude either.
Now,
to be honest with you, I'm still not. But that's out of my personal choice because I do a lot of eBay because I like the small business guy. That's just my thing. Yeah. So I will shop eBay before Amazon. But if I can't find it on eBay, my wife will be like, "You can get it on Amazon and get it delivered tomorrow." And I'm like, ah.
Right. And it's funny because the people I talk to who are not Amazon people, why would I want to use Amazon? They're going to take a week. I'm like, what are you talking about? Amazon Prime is like the same day in some cases.
Yeah.
I don't know about Amazon. Dude, get on Amazon and pay the Prime. But my point is, as I said earlier, right? Anything you do for 21 days becomes a habit.
Yeah.
People are now getting the habit of having stuff delivered to them. Yep. Thousands of people who are like me, hundreds of thousands, millions of people like, why do I need to have Amazon delivered to the house tomorrow? I can hop in the truck and go up the street to Home Depot or go up the street to Dewey Town Center and get it now.
Yeah.
I don't want to hop in the truck and go anywhere now. I'll wait till tomorrow.
Right. No, I mean, and Sherman, let's just compound that. So I got a 17-year-old son at home.
Yeah.
Okay. We've homeschooled for many years, so it wasn't a big deal. He started going to high school, 9th grade, and first time in public school. Halfway through his 10th year, COVID hits. He's like, okay, I guess we're doing back to homeschooling, right? So it is what. So he's very flexible. But like even like last night, we're like talking about like I don't know, getting dinner or something, and he was like, we could just like Grubhub 7-Eleven hot dogs, and I'm like,
well, here's the funny thing. Dave graduated high school last year.
Yeah.
And he was never homeschooled, but we talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
And so when he was graduating high school, his first choice for college was University of Maryland College Park.
Mm-hmm.
And the logic behind it was, if I go to University of Maryland College Park, I can stay home. I don't have to go on campus. My life doesn't have to change. In many ways, he's like his dad, just a homebody, right? Yeah. And we're like, oh no, hell no.
Get out of here.
You gotta go to college and experience and go on campus. And even if you get into Maryland, you are going to stay on campus because you need to have that experience, right? Yeah. So you're gonna go for 2 years, and if you don't like it, you can always come back home, right? So that was our plan, right? Let's say man plans, God laughs. So he didn't get into College Park. He did get into Drexel, and then he got into Towson. And we were talking about, where do you think you want to do? And while he liked Drexel because he went to a summer school program, he wasn't sold on Drexel. And Towson was sort of like, yeah, I've been there a couple of times, but it's not. He says, what I'm going to do, Dad, is I'm going to go to Anne Arundel Community College for 2 years, And then if I finish it there, they'll automatically admit it. I'm like, no, that's the same thing as going to College Park.
Right.
You're still staying at home.
Right.
Watered. I said, Drexel or Towson, pick it. And Towson was wonderful, right? As soon as he got admitted, they sent him this beautiful welcome to Towson package. Hope you choose up. I mean, they were just going all out of their way to like say, woo him there.
Right.
And I remember he said to me one time, well, Dad, you know, I really want to go to Maryland and Maryland doesn't want me. And I said, well, son, you ought to pray about that. And one of the things I want you to pray about is Towson does want you. And you should pray about that.
Yeah.
And I thought we were going to have sort of a what did you pick conversation about 3 or 4 days later because I don't want to put pressure on the kid. And 3 or 4 days later, I'm like, well, what do you think? And he's like, what do you mean, what am I thinking? I said, well, where you want to go? He says, I'm going to Towson. I've already signed up for my room. I've already given them a check.
Right.
So he does want to go to Towson. He spends the first semester on camp, loves it, right? Full on college experience in the dorms, whole 9 yards, moves from a room that's like X number of square feet down to a box that he shares with 2 other guys, right? So here's your space, this bunk bed and that desk. That's it, right?
Yep, that's it. You got it. Bunk bed, desk. Yep.
Absolutely loves it. And then, of course, coronavirus hits the second semester, and it's all sort of happening compressed in real time. And he's told, you know, get off campus for spring break by noon tomorrow. Yeah. Just leave your stuff. Just get out of here, right? It was almost like Game of Thrones. Winter is coming. We see this.
Right.
Get out. And so, long story short, they gave throughout the summer. And of course, Towson didn't let anybody back. No, none of the state schools in Maryland let anybody back on campus. Well, none of the schools let anybody back on campus. And Towson, to their credit, I love that school. Just when we were talking about like, okay, how are we going to get on the campus and get your stuff? And we were having that conversation, and a moving van rolls up. I'm like, what's that? And a moving van and a guy, again, contactless. Apparently what they had done is they had called Dave with a camera and they said, point out your stuff. And they boxed all his stuff up and shipped it back, no charge. They literally moved the kids' stuff off the campus. So they didn't even have to go back to campus to get their stuff.
Good, yeah.
And beautiful. And so then they sort of gave the kids a choice. Do you want to come back on campus or do you want to do distance learning? And he was sort of debating, which was good because like I had such a good time my freshman year, even though it was truncated. I kind of want to go back. But one of the things that they're telling us is if we do go back and there's another outbreak, we won't be able to leave the dorms. So essentially we'll have distance learning in the dorm. And so ultimately,
that's terrible.
He's like, and that's what he said. He's like, and they were like, it's not going to happen, but if we do have an outbreak on campus, it could happen. And so we just want to tell you heads up, if you do come back to campus and you do pick the dorm option, we're going to have, instead of 3 kids per dorm or 2 kids, you're going to have 1 student per dorm. But if there is an outbreak, you might have to quarantine in your dorm and you'll still do distance learning, but you're going to do it for. And he's like, nah. Mm-hmm. So the running joke in our house now very much is man plans, God laughs, because Dave is basically at home, distance learning, doing exactly what he said he wanted to do. Because I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but he actually has his own business. He has a clothing line that he started. Yeah, you told me. Yeah, in his high school, right? And that was originally his game plan. Well, he started getting interested in real estate. He's closed 3 deals now. Yeah. And so now he spent the whole summer just working on his real estate business, which was really good. Really been cool. And so now he's like, I want to stay home. I want to do classes, but I want to work on my clothing business and I want to work on my real estate business. And staying home is a much better option versus going back to the campus. So it's really funny how, parents have their, you must do this. And then life goes, yeah, right. Yeah, right, like, Dad. Boom.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay. And then you're like, all right, now I guess we're doing this. Okay. That's good.
But I am glad he at least got 1.5 semesters. Yeah. And he can at least check that box and go, yeah, I stayed in the dorm and I went to the football games and I hung with my buddies and went down to the Pizza Palace and at least say, okay, I had it, and now it's like, and I really, quite frankly, I feel for your son. I feel for my son because these kids are just having to grow up so much faster. Yeah. With all, that's sort of the really, and I don't know if that's the sad thing or maybe it just is a thing and I shouldn't label it as sad or anything else. Shouldn't put that label on it. But, when we were kids, whether you had a chance to go off to college or not go off to college, at least up through high school, you kind of had a little bit of the real world is out there and I'll get there when I get there.
Yeah.
And these kids today, it's like the real world is creeping in on them at such an earlier age. That the stuff that they got to deal with,
Totally
that
agree.
we didn't have to deal with.
No.
It's kind of scary to me.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
So in the fall or in another time, if we go back in lockdown, like nationwide, all bets off?
So here's my attitude. Now I'll talk about what I know and I won't talk about what I don't know. And if I'm speculating, I'll say I'm speculating.
Sure.
The trends that I'm seeing and where should investors be focused? The single family house business, in my opinion, still has a lot of legs.
Okay.
It has a lot of legs for a lot of reasons, but the number one reason is demand. And if you make your decisions based on demand versus supply, you'll be much better off if you make decisions based on tax code or
totally agree. All that changes and So who's the biggest driver of demand for housing? In my opinion, it's the first-time home buyer and the move-up home buyer. And for the most part, the millennials have not really been in the home ownership part of housing in any significant way at all. But they're starting to now. Yeah.
And anytime you talk about real estate or business, there's always winners and losers. Always. To me, the winners are the ones who are providing housing in the suburbs, in the close-in suburbs, in those locations where if I have to go to a job, I can be there in an hour or less. But if I don't have to go to a job, I need a little more space. I need a little more. In other words, now that home has become where we literally work, live, and play.
Yeah.
The concept of live, work, and play in a 600
tiny
square
house.
foot. Yeah.
In a tiny house just doesn't appeal to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And at least for Gregory and Lauren, Gregory, my oldest son, who just bought a house in Laurel, the fact that they have a yard and their dog, he can literally open the door and the dog can go out and then the dog can come back. And they at least have a little patch of grass. And they're very, very fortunate because the house they bought had a pool already in, ready to go. That is so far superior for them than an apartment house that they're paying $3,800, like they're paying $2,800 for a mortgage for a house, which is now, call it 2,000 square feet or even 1,400 square feet, right? That is so far superior to a 700 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment where all the amenities, the pool, the park, the parking, were all shared.
Right.
The health club shared. And when coronavirus hit, they couldn't use it anyway.
Exactly.
So you're paying, so for them, they're paying $1,000 a month premium. They're sacrificing 1,000 to 1,300 square feet, right? 700 square feet versus 2,000 square feet. And the amenities they're paying for, they can't use anyway. So now all of a sudden, in this new reality, whether it's a temporary reality or the new reality, where you live, work, and play in the same space, they're moving the dishes off the table so now they can turn the table into their desk. And at night, they're moving the papers off the table so they can turn the table into the dining table, right? Now they got a house. They got their own house. They're spending $1,000 a month, which means now they got $1,000 more to do whatever they want with. The house came with a pool. The house came with a patch of grass, call it a quarter of an acre, third of an acre.
I love it.
And they got separate rooms.
Yeah.
I got a room that's now my desk, and I don't have to clean anything off, right? So I think in this reality where you're spending so much time in the same space, having the ability to enjoy that space. And I think more and more people are going to be like, why am I paying so much money in rent when there's houses still out there available? So I do think that Gregory and Lauren and that's indicative of a trend I think that's going to start and continue. And when you look at the depth of that market, again, Anna Bonpasu said, 27-year-olds, 28-year-olds are two of the three largest cohorts in America today. That's the largest group of people. Like, even if everybody doesn't do it, but let's say maybe a third of them do it. Lauren is an influencer on Instagram. She got 50,000 followers. Let's say that all 50,000 don't decide to do what she, but maybe 10,000 do. Maybe 5,000. Maybe 1/10 of her followers go, you know what? Lauren's kind of like me. We're about the same age. Let me go talk to my parents. Let me go talk to my board. Let me go talk to my, let me see if I can go buy a house as opposed to paying off. Like that, to me, is the start of a trend that nobody's talking about now. 2 years from now, we'll be reading about it in the NAR report about how millennials are driving the market, right?
I agree with you.
As an investor. As an investor. When do you want to start taking advantage of that? Now?
Yesterday?
Or 2 years from now when you read about it in the publication?
Right. What's I say? When's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday.
Today.
When's the best? When's the next best time? Today.
Today, right? So I think that's a trend worth paying attention to. Unlike the housing market collapse.
Yeah.
A lot of people, oh, isn't the housing market due for collapse? Not even. The housing market collapse of 2007, 8, 9, 10. And again, it just depended on where you were in the country, right?
Yep.
That was fueled by too much cheap money, putting a new category of home buyer in houses that should have had houses to begin with. And when that money supply got cut off, that whole segment of the market collapsed.
Yep.
This housing market, for the most part, the demand side, has been fueled by everybody but the millennials. And now the millennials are starting to get into the mix. And to me, that's a demand trend that's going to be, it would have happened anyway a year or two from now. COVID-19 is forcing that to happen sooner rather than later. Because people are now.
But also, I just want to throw a caveat to that.
Yeah.
You got to think of the mentality of the millennials. They're not buying the McMansions and they're not buying the tiny homes.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And for the most part, somewhere in the middle, that 12 to 1,800 square foot. Right. You know what I mean?
And I think if you had taken a millennial last fall and pulled them aside and say, why are you doing what you're doing? Why aren't you buying a house? Why aren't you being responsible? They probably would have said, I realize that that's going to happen in the future. But where I am today, I want to enjoy hanging out with my friends at the local restaurant. I want to enjoy staying out all night with my friends, going to the disco bar. And I don't want to be burdened with the responsibility of a mortgage and a house.
That's right.
COVID-19 hits and you're in quarantine. The restaurants are closed. The bars are closed.
Yep.
And whether it's done by governmental action or the reality of, oh my God, all my patrons getting sick, we better shut down, right?
Right.
That lifestyle that is for a lot of people a natural part of a certain phase of your life, it's being truncated.
Yeah.
Right? That 27-20, there was only so many more years that was going to be a part of their lifestyle. They were trying to hang on to it for as long as possible. COVID-19 hits and says, sorry guys, that door's closed. Well, if that door's closed,
that probably would have continued for another 3 years to that 27, 28, it would have been 30. And then it's like, okay, time to grow up.
Yeah. Now they're going to go for 6 months to a year that's not even going to be a part of their lifestyle. Right?
Agreed.
And they're like, okay, that door's now closed.
Yep. Is
now the time to think about the next phase of life. Well, let me help. COVID-19 said, well, let me help you out. You know that fancy apartment building that you got where you said it's okay to live in 500 square feet, 400 square feet, 300 square feet, because the excuse you gave as well, I don't need a kitchen. I don't need it because the city is my kitchen. The city is my living room.
I remember that. Developers building micro units. Like, where's the kitchen?
Units.
The millennials don't cook. I'm like,
guess what? Guess what? Your living room's closed. Your kitchen's closed. You have to cook your own darn food.
Exactly.
Right? Well, it's okay, Scott, because I'm only going to spend, I only need it for a place to sleep at night because I'm going to be at work and I'm going to be at the bar. Right. Like, your job is closed. You got to work from home now. And now all of a sudden you're looking around 300 square feet going, this is not enough space.
No.
I can't get done there. And oh, by the way, if I decide, like maybe I've got a good paying job and my health club is closed, maybe Spin Soul, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'll buy a Peloton, maybe I'll spend $2,000 to buy a Peloton. Okay, where are you going to put it?
Right.
You going to move the bed?
Exactly.
So the reality is, whether you buy a house or you stay in urban living and just get a bigger apartment, you're going to have to move.
Yeah.
Psychologically, you're going to need more. If you're now spending, I don't know, somewhere upwards of 20 hours a day in one place, are you really going to be able to do that in 300 square feet and not want to kill yourself?
Right.
I don't think so.
No. I mean, I live on a farm. We didn't leave for 3 months, and I was like, ah.
Yeah. And now think about the person who's living in a broom closet because the mental justification they gave was, I'm never going to do anything here but sleep.
Right.
My friends and I, we're going to go to the bars, we're going to go to the restaurants, we're going to go to the office. Hey, I got downsized. It's okay. I got WeWork.
Yep.
I got the co-work.
Exactly.
All of it's taken away.
All of it's gone. Yep.
And I think even the person who's like, I still kind of want to stay here. You can't stay in 300 square feet. You can't stay in 4, maybe 5, maybe 6. But you
don't get me wrong. There are those that do those sometimes for life, but that's called prison.
Hello. Right. So I just think that what the coronavirus is doing, and again, I'm reluctant to use the phrase silver lining because it's killing people.
Yeah.
But the reality is the coronavirus is forcing people to adjust their lifestyles and adjust their housing needs.
That's right.
And for many people, logic and chronology is going to dictate it's time to move to the next phase. And for many people that are in the 30-something, moving to a house with a little patch of grass has been the natural progression in American society and American economy and American housing for time immemorial. And I think that this back to the city movement of the city is my living room, dining room, play area, and work
is done.
And all I need is a little place to with a bed to, go to sleep, catch a shower, because I'm going to go get breakfast at Starbucks. Those days are over. For the vast majority of people, those days are over. And I see this trend similar to like the baby boom migration into the suburbs becoming big time. And that's a part of the housing market that's been missing in this housing recovery. And I think it has that combined with low interest rates has the potential to fuel a back to the suburbs movement that we haven't seen since the 1940s, 1950s.
It's the second wave of suburban sprawl.
Absolutely. And to a large degree, it may not be new housing, although I see a lot of townhouses, especially where I am. I see a lot of townhouses going up because townhouses are affordable. Mm-hmm. I see a lot, I see a lot of repositioning and a lot of adaptive reuse of existing structures that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And I think that trend, maybe even getting a small house and pushing it out a little bit and adding a third bedroom to a small house if it's cost effective. So I very much see single family housing being a place where investors really need to focus their attention, I think, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. 2 reasons. One, you've got demand for it. You've got interest rates that are incredibly low. And for the most part, that's probably the only part of the real estate sector that and I've been in this business for 30 plus years, that's the only part of the real estate sector that I can see that doesn't have any significant issues. Right?
Right.
Right? And look, if there are people
money runs from risk. So yeah, I agree with you.
If there are people who want housing and the money's available for housing, right? So what's missing? The housing. Okay, yeah, home builders are going to fill some of that gap, and some of the home builders will fill the gap by building townhouses, and some of the home builders will fill the gap by building mansions. No question about it. But to a large degree, there's a big area to play for rehabbers to take some of these houses. If you got a house that was built before 1978, well, you got to get all the lead paint out.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody coming in and totally stripping all the lead paint and doing carpet and paint and cleaning the place up, there's a demand for that.
So let me give you a little inside tip on this because, I just paid attention to it from the business aspect, but I've done a lot of analyzing on Airbnb and the hotel chains buying Airbnbs previously, right?
Right.
Airbnbs now are like really like no one wants to go into shared communal space, right? And if they do, then they gotta like clean the entire place, HEPA vac filters, they gotta upgrade, all that kind of stuff. And they're really, if they're breaking even right now, then they're doing pretty good.
Agreed.
To me, as a residential investor, that would be the place that I would look to buy some single family homes, some previous Airbnbs. They've been maintained.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I agree. Right. Look,
In some cool locations, probably, right?
Sam Zell, and anybody who's an investor who's never heard of Sam Zell, shame on you, you're not a real investor yet.
Right.
Sam Zell made a ton of money buying distressed assets.
Yeah.
From other people who swore they were smarter than he was.
Yeah.
His nickname is the Grave Dancer, and for years he refused to let anybody write a biography on him. And I think a biography came out on him about 2 or 3 years ago. So if you don't know Sam Zell, you ought to go to Amazon and buy his biography. But his whole thing, this guy made $3 billion fortunes in 3 different segments. He had $1 billion fund to do
parts, right?
mobile homes. Yep. You know, he had $1 billion fund. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was Manufactured Homes of America or something like that. He did $1 billion fund to do apartments, equity apartments, and then he had $1 billion fund to do office buildings, equity office.
Yep.
And he made 3 separate $1 billion fortunes in those 3 sectors and he's one of the smartest guys ever on buying distressed assets. So yes, there's always a role for the person.
I met him one time at a ULI event.
Yeah.
Like
he was very active.
Ago.
He was a very active supporter of the Wharton School. He's from Chicago, but he was very active supporter of the Wharton School. He was very active in support of ULI. But long story short, yes, that model of doing distressed stuff works if you know what you're doing. Do the research.
Yeah. I just think specifically the Airbnb houses, because the actual property isn't distressed. The industry is distressed.
No, I get it. But the point I'm trying to make is that if the trend is big enough, you don't have to be smart.
Yeah.
If the wave is big enough and you want to go surfing, just get in front of the wave, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of newbie investors who are like, is now the time to get into real estate? Is now the time to do wholesaling, bird dogging, get into rehabbing? I would say yes.
Yeah.
But I would focus on bread and butter, first-time home buyer houses where people are doing exactly what my son did. My son comparing, if I'm paying $3,800 a month for a 700 square foot 2-bedroom apartment, and now I've decided I need to leave that phase of my life and go to the next phase of my life and go get a house. What can I get for $3,800? And for those investors who are rehabbers, for those investors who are supporting rehabbers, start with that number and work your way backwards. In other words, where can I find a house where the mortgage payment is going to be $3,800 or less? If you go to bankrate.com and you just play around with the mortgage calculation for first-time home buyer, you'll see that a $3,800 mortgage could probably buy a, I don't know, $400,000 house.
25,
yeah. So you could say, okay, well, what's out there for? And what you'll find is in certain submarkets of the DC region, like Prince George's County, right? If you're willing to go far enough out, right? Certain pockets of Montgomery County, certain pockets of Northern Virginia, $450,000 is not difficult. In fact, if you come to Prince George's County, the average value for a house in Prince George's County is $365. So there's a whole lot of $450. Now, does that mean he necessarily wants to buy a 5-bedroom colonial? He doesn't need a 5-bedroom colonial. He don't want a 5-bedroom colonial. So now you take that number and cross match it with, okay, what are the other kinds of things that he wants besides just the price of the house? Well, most of his friends are still in the city, so it'd be kind of nice to be not too far out. He's coming out of city living, so maybe going all the way down into the boonies. Waldorf is not, and I don't mean to insult anybody in Waldorf or Yakima, but maybe being out in the country life is not quite, he's not quite ready for that. Too much solitude. So can I go to a suburban area where there's still kind of a town center-ish? Is there still some kind of mass transit, maybe a metro line or something? Is there still some activity? But I'm not too far. Yeah. And so as he started doing his looking, it was sort of like outside the Beltway. And then ultimately they found a really cute place in Laurel that was like a 3 or 4 bedroom with a pool. And Lauren really liked sort of that more contemporary style that you don't really see built anymore. Is really more popular in the 70s, almost like a California-ish, wide open, lots of glass, right? But a lot of builders aren't building. And a townhouse wasn't going to cut it, right? And they didn't need a 5. So now it's okay, well, look, hey, we found a really nice house for like $380. And now all of a sudden the mortgage isn't $3,800, it's $2,800. So now we can actually put more money in our pocket, but we get more space, patch of grass, The
Yep.
same kind of floor to ceiling glass that we really loved about our apartment. But now we're just sort of going into that next phase of our life. And I think those rehabbers who focus on what the market wants, what the market needs, I think those wholesalers who focus on what do the rehabbers need, I think those bird dogs who focus, and there's lots of great pockets like that. I don't know, you're up at Harford County?
Yep.
Okay, I'm down here in Prince George's County. I mean, Route 1, excuse me, we don't call it Route 1 anymore. We now call it Baltimore Avenue, right? But the area around College Park, right? There was a busboys at Hyattsville over kind of where DeMatha High School and the bus. There's these kinds of houses everywhere. And you can buy those for $250 to $300, fix them up and resell them for $350 to $380 all day long.
Like your very first real estate investment purchase, that it was a small single family house, wasn't it?
Nicer than that. I mean, my first purchase was on 1503 Pacific Avenue, and it's a cute little house, and the guy who fixed it up did a really great job.
But I mean, that kind of community. Is that what you're talking about?
No, that community was more like hood. There was active gunfire. There was tires piled up. It wasn't Baltimore hood, but it was Prince George's hood, right?
Yeah.
It is now subsequently, and I think you're kind of right. Today, I would say, yeah, today it's kind of like that kind of a neighborhood.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
that's the kind of community you're talking about.
I mean, and those neighborhoods are all over Prince George's, especially inside the Beltway. And then again, they, for one reason or another, they kind of gravitated towards Laurel.
Yep.
And Laurel technically is outside the Beltway. Laurel's sort of unique. It's kind of like where Prince George's, Howard County.
When I first moved to Maryland, that's where I moved, was to Laurel.
Yeah.
So I could service both DC and Baltimore, and Laurel.
It has
right in the middle.
And it's very popular amongst University of Maryland grads because it's not too far from College Park. It has a town center-ish kind of feel to it. It's got lots of great retail. Obviously, you can't get anywhere except by car. So for somebody who's more pedestrian-oriented, probably a Hyattsville kind of or College Park location is probably, because at least you can park the car and walk around and get to places. But again, for the most part, I just think we got a trend that's starting and going to be driven by the millennials and probably be the trend for the next decades. I mean, what we're going to see happening with this group of millennials as they now they already entered the workforce. Now they're entering the housing market in a big way. Soon they'll be having families in a big way. Yep. Not too far distant future, they're going to be the move-up market, right? Have 2 more kids, and now you do need that colonial. They're going to be driving this real estate economy for the next several decades. And if you're actually paying attention and saying to yourself, gee, how do I make money off of this? And focus on what that group of people needs, what that group of people wants, you're going to be far more likely to be successful than if you're just sort of throwing darts at a dartboard to pick your real estate strategy. And as I said, if you look at the retail sector, it's a hot mess, unless, of course, you're Jeff Bezos and you're shipping to people's houses. If you look at the hotel sector, it's death, unless, of course, you're in the extended stay. And the extended stay market is a subset of a sub. I mean, extended stay, I've done a lot of research on extended stay because we're working on an extended stay product. It's really sort of more apartment building meets hotel. It's more like an apartment than it is like a hotel, right?
Yeah.
And there's only really a handful of locations that really make sense. Having said that, the extended stay, the hotel sector right now is averaging about 20% occupancy, and I'm shocked that it's that high. And most people who are in the hotel business will tell you need 60% occupancy at least to survive. The extended stay part of the market is in the 70s. And to a large degree, I think that's temporary. What's happening is a lot of healthcare and first responders need to be on the job, and they're deathly afraid. And I don't mean that sarcastically or facetiously. I mean it reality. They're deathly afraid that they may take the COVID virus home. Yes. So they would rather come off work and stay at a hotel, but they need a full-size kitchen. They need a full-size refrigerator. They want a real stove, not a microwave, because they're not going to Chuck E. Cheese they're not going to McDonald's every night to eat. Yeah. They're buying groceries and cooking real food and eating real food, and they're getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night, and then they're going right back to the hospital, right? They're going right back on the front lines. So the extended stay product is perfect for that need right now in the marketplace, right? So, but otherwise, the hotel industry is a disaster, right? If you look at office space, and we were talking about that earlier, there's not going to be any kind of great demand for office space for several years. Years. So if you look at all the different sectors of the real estate space, and people still like the concept of investing in real, the one that really makes sense to me is single family houses in the close-in suburbs, because there the trend is your friend. Demand is there, interest rates are low, and there's not an abundance of supply. And guess what? You can't overbuild it.
It's true. Yeah.
It's more a rehabber's plaything. And yeah, there's individual pockets here and there of, maybe 5 acres, 10 acres, and K-Hove or Beezer or somebody else can come in and build 30, 40 townhouses. But there ain't nobody building today in America, or I should say America, but here in the DC, nobody's out there building 2,000 houses.
Right. No.
Right?
No, they can't bankroll that.
Right. But if you look at the millennials, I mean, how many hundreds of thousands, millions of millennials are there? And even if a fraction of them decided that now they wanted to move to the suburbs, right? And I haven't done this math. I'm going to do it real quick in my head, and I could be way off. DC area has 7 million people. Let's assume for a second that out of 7 million people, that millennials comprise, I don't know, 1.5 million, 2 million? Is that outlandish?
No.
Let's say millennials are 2 million. And for the most part, millennials have been either living in their parents' basement or moving into apartments in the city. And now all of a sudden they wake up and realize, this is stupid, this is ridiculous, let's move to the suburb. And not everybody can and not everybody will. Maybe they're just thinking about it, but they're not going to act on it. What if only 10% of that group decided to move to the suburbs? What's that look like? 10% of 2 million.
10% of 2 million?
Yeah. 200,000?
Yeah.
200,000.
Yeah. And
they want to go where first-time home buyer opportunities are in abundance. Yeah, clearly some will buy a condo in DC. I get it. Yeah. But you're still sort of faced with the same thing. High prices, high mortgage, and all the amenities you want called city living is still shut down.
Yep.
Right? So it's like, gee, if I can't go to the bars, I can't go to the restaurants, and I can't go to them for the foreseeable future, can I at least have a little patch of land and twice as much space? You're still looking at the same set of issues.
Yeah.
Let's say that there's 200,000 people who are looking to move to the burbs. Where are they going to go? Bethesda? Chevy Chase?
Nah.
Baltimore?
No.
I think they're coming to Prince George's County.
Howard County. Frederick.
Howard County, if they're really interested in the schools.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe Northern Virginia, but there's always sort of been this stigma about that Potomac River, where if you're in DC, you're far more likely to go to Maryland than you are. I mean, that sort of Potomac. I mean, this was true when I got out of college.
DC, honestly, if I'm in DC,
yeah.
If I was a DC resident, and I'm saying this only because I was just there, but if I'm in DC,
yeah,
I'm moving to West Virginia.
Okay, fair enough. But a lot of people.
I'm moving to Martinsburg.
Yeah, but you're in Harford County. You're in Harford County anyway. You like country living,
right? I'm just saying, taxes alone, you can still get the DC.
So here's the problem with your hypothesis, right?
What?
You'd never be in DC.
I would never be right. And also, not everybody. People tend to think that I would never be in DC. I actually hate DC for multiple reasons, but I mean, just that alone.
But for people
don't generally buy real estate just to save money on taxes either. I mean,
yeah, but a lot of
people say that as analysts, but the reality of it is that's never a driving factor. Like, I'm going to buy this house because I'm only going to buy the house because I'm going to save money on taxes. I was like, no, that's like saying I'm going to buy everything in the store because it's only 50% off. Like,
yeah, exactly.
No.
Like, every time you go to BJ's, you come home with a pallet.
Right.
We used to laugh about people coming home with a pallet of toilet paper. We're like, you know what? Maybe we should get a pallet of toilet paper next time. That's a possibility. But here's my point in all that. Most people don't realize, and I do because I faced that decision back in the 1980s when I graduated from college. I graduated from Towson. I went to Philadelphia, got my MBA, and then the job took me to Stanford, but the job I was working at Stanford was going to transfer me back. And I had to decide, am I going to go on the Virginia side of the Potomac, or am I going to go on to Maryland, DC? And a lot of people don't realize that's a huge psychological decision to make. It really is a different lifestyle in Northern Virginia versus Maryland slash Northern DC slash suburban Maryland. And I think for the most part, most people who live in DC and enjoy living in DC who decide to come out of DC, they're far more likely to go to Maryland, anywhere in Maryland, versus Northern Virginia. Is that a hard, fast rule? No. Is it always? No. But again, just to sort of like take
even
this
Southwest.
What do you mean even South? You mean even coming out of Southwest?
Yeah, because I would think Southwest to go to Northern Virginia.
No. It has way. It's not about geography. It's about what happens up here. Despite the fact that Virginia has become much more of a purple state, historically Virginia was kind of a red state and way more. And that's why the NRA.
Yeah.
That's why when the NRA came out of DC, it's a wonder they were ever DC in the first place. They're like, no, we're going to North Virginia. We ain't going to Maryland. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? It's really more along the lines of political philosophy. You know, who are you more compatible with in terms of your religious / political beliefs? And DC, Maryland is more closely aligned than Northern Virginia. Now, Northern Virginia over the years, over the decades, has become a little more Democratic. It's become a little more purple, but it's still not quite, you know, I oftentimes say Maryland's a deep blue state, right? We in Maryland, it's a wonder Larry Hogan ever became governor, but we in Maryland are way more socialistic than even Massachusetts, right?
Oh yeah.
So
a lot of people don't realize that, but
yeah, I mean, how you and I are still here, I don't know, right?
Right. Well,
me,
as I always say, someone's got to be behind the enemy lines.
Right. Well, me, it's because of my wife and steamed crabs. Yeah, my wife was very, very smart. Like when we got married, I was living in Old Town, and we decided to get married, and I was like, okay, there's no way I'm gonna get her and the 2 kids over into my little teeny house in Old Town.
Right.
So I got rid of it, came over here, and the very first thing we did after we got married was to go out to Mike's on Riva and have steamed crabs on the dock. And I was like, you know, you can't do this anywhere in the world but Maryland.
No, right, exactly.
And it's like all of a sudden my plans of sneaking everybody back to Northern Virginia went out the window, right?
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make is like, okay, take this hypothetical scenario that we've been talking about. Again, gross simplification, but you got to start somewhere. If there are 2 million millennials in the DC area who are looking at the exact same set of facts and the exact same set of circumstances or similar circumstances as my son was looking at. And they come to the conclusion that now's the time to close this door on this chapter of my life and open the new door to the next chapter. And that new door to the next chapter looks like a place in the suburbs. And we say, okay, 2 million people in the DC area are thinking about it, but only 10% will act on it. That's 200,000 people.
Yeah.
And when I say act, I mean have the capacity to act on it, have the need to act. I mean, the person who's living in their parents' basement may still live in their parents' basement and just think about it. But the person who's paying $3,800 a month for a 700 square foot apartment for a bunch of amenities they can't use, they're not just, they're going to act on it as soon as that lease comes due, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in the way of commercial real estate, they're acting on it before the lease comes due. They're like, no.
Exactly, right? So let's just, for conservative guesstimation, and it is a guesstimate, let's say it's 10% of 2 million. That's 200,000 people.
Yeah.
Who are now actively looking to get out of DC and move either to the close-in suburbs or the further out suburbs.
Yeah.
Yes, a certain percentage will go to Northern Virginia. And yes, a certain percentage will go to Howard County and Anne Arundel County and maybe even outside. But the bulk of them, where are they going to go? They're probably coming to Prince George's County. They're probably going to parts of Montgomery County. If they went up the Montgomery County schools, they're probably going, like you said, Howard County. That's 200,000. You tell me which home builder. That's what I was
going to say. You know,
right? Tell me which home builder has enough dirt to build 200,000 houses in the next 24 to 36 months. They don't. So the fact that K-Hove is putting up a development with 500 houses that's going to take them 2 years to sell out, the fact that Beazer or Stanley Martin Homes is putting up 200, who cares? There's 200,000 people coming this way. Are you telling me that the handful of rehabbers who are active rehabbers aren't going to get a chunk of that business?
Right. Well, I mean, a residential realtor that's worth their salt would look at this and say, what is the supply gap?
Yeah.
Where does it need to get filled?
Yeah.
Go sell dirt. Literally.
Go sell dirt, or better yet,
Renovate
if you are inclined.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad analysis. But you know, and I know the challenge of selling dirt is how long from the time you sell the dirt to the time the house actually gets built.
3-year pipeline.
5.
Well, yeah.
The picture of the county's 5.
5, yeah.
Yeah, it's 18 months to get through your approvals.
Yeah.
It's another 18 months to get the site work done, and it's another 18 months to get the house built.
So you really should be.
And by the way, there's no overlap in any of that.
No.
It's discrete.
Yep. So you should really be looking at the early 20-year-olds. If you're looking at building existing now, you need to be looking at what are the 20-year-olds today doing.
I literally, I'm trying to remember where I had to go. I literally had to drive Central Avenue. I know what it was. We bought a house down in Capitol Heights, and they had an extra recycling bin, and my wife wanted me to go grab the recycling bin so Gregor could come get it and take it to his new house in Laurel. So I drove Central Avenue. That's the first time I've driven Central Avenue in that direction.
Yep.
In about 2 months. About 2 months. I mean, I've literally been such a hermit in my house because, like, I got everything I need. I got a pool, I got 2 acres. I got my dog. What else do I need, right? So first time I've driven Central Avenue westward towards the city in 2 months. And as I'm driving, I'm seeing a brand new apartment complex going up along Central Avenue near the Beltway. And I'm also seeing Stanley Martin delivering another phase of houses and new apartment. And it's really getting densified. And it suddenly dawned on me, these were both 2 projects that I looked at with a business partner 15 years ago that are finally getting built. I had a business partner who was in the
15 years ago, yeah.
And exactly what he said should happen, did happen. But unfortunately, there was a recession and a bankruptcy in between.
Exactly.
And the challenge with doing land development is there's almost always a recession and a bankruptcy. So I'm not arguing that you're now. Having said that, the guy who brokered the dirt got paid, right? So your reasoning for the person who wants to do dirt stuff is sound. However, oftentimes there's hiccups along the way between dirt acquisition to actual delivery of final product. That's all.
Yeah, you're right.
But for the average investor, and I'm trying to keep my comments towards the average investor who's just getting started or the newbie investor, hey, where do I go? Where do I play? I think this single family housing, to be honest with you, is I think there's enough depth to that market, again, specifically the millennials, that I'm looking to buy houses and hold on to them for the next 15 years. Why?
Yeah.
In 15 years, my 27-year-old son will be what, 42?
Yeah.
If the math is right, is that right?
Yeah.
All right. 42? No, 27, 7 and 5 is 12.
And
yeah, so 42.
42.
Right. The benchmark, the midpoint for the millennials will be 42. Well, what are 42-year-olds doing? What are 42-year-olds doing?
Having kids, trying to get
having their third kid, right?
Yeah. Trying to get their kids.
or as I say to my baby sister, the mistake. Right? She loves it when I said that. Not. Their third kid. They may be thinking about moving into a slightly bigger house because now financially they're in a place that they can afford that McMansion, right? Yeah. But some of them, quite frankly, are staying in the same house and just fixing it up, right? But their lifestyle is not radically different. They're still too young to be in that sort of like move into an assisted living, right? So if the trend is going to be this new wave of people moving to the burbs and doing home ownership, I think that trend's good for 20 years. I think that trend is good from, let's call it 27 to 47. Because when you start getting 47, like 47 for a lot of families, that's when the kids start going off to college. That's when the last kid starts and most people, once they move into that next phase of life of home ownership, they tend to stay in the suburbs. Maybe they move up once, maybe twice, but they don't start thinking about a back to the city. They don't think about downsizing. They're not they don't think about that stuff until the kids have gone off to college. And they suddenly realize, I don't need a 5-bedroom house in the burbs if it's just me and the wife. And if you got divorced, so I think we're good. I think this back to the suburbs. And again, granted, I'm making some really gross simplifications and some gross assumptions, but sometimes that's how fortunes are made. But I'm playing the trend. I'm not playing.
That's what you gotta look
I'm
at.
not playing the niche. I'm playing the trend, right? And there's strategies for playing the niche, like what you're talking about, going after the Airbnb guys.
Yep.
And then there's strategies for playing the trend. I'm playing the trend. So if I'm playing the trend, why not buy some of those houses now and hang on to them? So here's the magic of 15. What's so magical about 15, right? Number one, I think the trend's good for 20 years. Well, if I'm in for 15 and I'm wrong, maybe the trend's not for 20, maybe the trend's only good for 10, I can get out.
Yeah.
But I don't have to worry about getting out for another 10 years. It's almost like a Ron Popeil. Set it and forget it, right? I can do it over and over again and not really worry about it for another 10 years before I have to make my adjustments, right? If I think the trend's 20 and I'm right, then at the 15-year mark, I can sell and probably still be a part of the trend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not seeing prices rise as great. Maybe I'm not seeing as many people moving back to the suburbs, but people are still moving back. There's still demand. I can sell into the waning parts of the trend. Got it?
Yep.
But here's what's really magical about 15. In the greater Washington, D.C. area, not true of every SMSA, not true of every submarket, not true of every market, metropolitan market, but is true D.C. The local boards of realtors have done enough studies over and over and over again to validate what I'm about to say. In the greater Washington, D.C. area, D.C. proper, close in suburbs, houses double in value every 14.9 years.
Yeah.
Houses double in value.
Yep.
If I'm playing a trend,
I would say at least double.
Some places, yes.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're smart enough to buy below market, then you should expect to do even
the
better.
only way to buy.
Right. But if I'm just playing the trend, and I honestly believe that we're starting to see the beginnings of a wave of out of the city and back to the suburbs, particularly close in suburbs, and I can find those properties where I can get them below market, hang on to them for 15 years, and have them as positive, passive cash flowing, that I have enough money to pay the mortgage and enough money to hire a property manager. If I play the trend, I'll probably pick up some pocket change from those houses, but that's not my big payday. My big payday is when that $350,000 house becomes a $700,000.
700, yeah.
And oh, by the way, what am I doing with the money I'm making off of the monthly cash flow? I am paying the mortgage, but I might even be putting another $1,000 down towards turning my 30-year into a 15-year mortgage, which means my $300,000 mortgage, the mortgage balance in 15 years might be 100, it might be 50.
Yeah.
If I play it that way, I might be able to pay down $200,000 in principal, not only through the natural pay down of the principal, but the extra payments that I make.
Yep.
Which now means my $350,000 house is worth $700,000. And oh, by the way, my mortgage balance.
Right. Yeah.
Or 100.
Yeah.
If I do that 10 times, Scott, where does that put me?
Yeah.
Now here's the magic question. Do you plan on being alive in 15 years?
Sure. Well, I would hope so.
God willing.
I'm not that old. Yeah.
Well, coronavirus. Right?
I mean, I wouldn't, in 15 years, I still won't be retirement age.
I got it. But I do. I'm not being, God will be. So what could I possibly do with 10 houses that are worth $700,000? What could I do with $7 million?
For anything you want.
Now compare that strategy to anything else that's out there for a real estate investor. Commercial, retail, assisted living, hotel. You compare what I just said to any other potential strategy. And if it's better than what I'm talking about, please share it with me because I want to in on it.
That's going to take some time. I don't have one yet.
Well, it was a rhetorical question. But my point is, where do we start this conversation? I know we're like almost an hour and a half.
Yeah.
God, almost 2 hours. But the conversation started with, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
This is it. This is what I'm looking at, and this is why. And while you and I both have those magical letters, and thank you for helping me get mine, but CCIM, there's nothing wrong with being a CCIM, and there's nothing wrong with being the smartest kid on the block about commercial. But if residential staring you in the face, if a trend is staring you in the face, if an opportunity is staring you in the face, and you're like, it's residential, you're an idiot. I don't mean you're an idiot, but I'm just saying, listening.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that because that's residential. I'm a commercial guy. Well, you can still be a commercial guy in your day job. Yeah. But how can you possibly ignore what I think? And again, it's Sherman's opinion, and I could be wrong. I'll go back and validate it with Anibon because he's the guy that actually does this stuff for a living. How can you ignore what I believe is the start of a trend that is very similar to what happened when the baby boomers started influencing the U.S. economy back in the 1940s and 50s?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I felt like deja vu back to the start of the conversation where we talked about how money started kind of becoming more prevalent in 2005, and we were kind of like, whoa, something's happening here. Well, I'm not sure exactly what's happening here or why, but this is a start of something.
Right.
I hear all these residential agents saying, we are so busy, we can't keep properties on the market. And my thought is looking out there at everything and going, this is a start of something, just like I felt in 2005. I'm like, this is something happening. I need to figure it out. Like, why is this occurring? Like, where does that leave? Is this a hot flash, or is this like something bigger? So,
but unlike 2005 was totally fueled by Countrywide, right?
Yeah.
By the time we got, remember, and you and I remember this. Everybody knows the facts, but they don't remember the history. You and I remember the history because we lived it.
Right.
By the time and you were very active, right? You and Nina were very, very active, right? In the market. By the time we got to 2005, the real estate, especially the single-family house business, had already started recovering in 2001. So we had 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. We had 5 good years. In the single-family house business, 5 good years is almost a lifetime. We were due for a recession in 2006. So why did we continue on 2006, 2007, 2008? Because Countrywide and Lehman were pushing liar loans, subprime loans, no-doc loans, and they suddenly brought in a whole new category of buyer that had never before existed. Unfortunately, that new category buyer had no business being anywhere around a mortgage.
It's like when you
collapsed, right? But here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing, right? Nobody ever wants to be a student of this. You and I do, but most people, they don't want to be a student. They don't actually analyze and put the cadaver up on the table and cut it open and say exactly what happened. It's like, you got hit by a car. Right? No,
I do, just because I want to understand it. Like I want to break it apart and see how it works and put it back together.
Everybody else is sitting around going, well, I saw him walking in front of a truck. No, the guy got sick. He was delirious. He walked down a hill. He was actually dead before the truck hit him, right?
Exactly.
But only the people who do the post-mortem know. The bottom line is this. Average home ownership in America is like 54, 55%, right? Average foreclosure rate in America is about 1.5 to 2%. That means 98% of the people who have mortgages figure out a way to pay their mortgages. There are whole segments of the population that they will do anything but miss a mortgage payment. That is how they've been conditioned. Like, you and I were both Boy Scouts, right? Yep. We know in certain parts of American culture, if you're a Boy Scout, if you're a first responder, if you're a military, you don't mess with your payments, especially your mortgage. You figure out a way to go get the extra money, right? Even if you have to eat pork and beans, you'll figure. And there's a whole segment of America that believes it, and there's a whole segment of America that looks at folks like that and go, "What?" Right? Now, here's my point. When Lehman, Countrywide, and the Bush administration said everybody should have a house, and we took that pendulum that normally swings between, let's call it, on the low side, bad years, 48% home ownership to 54% ownership, and they said everybody should get a house, and and Lehman's going to provide the money, and Countrywide's going to provide the mortgages. We pushed home ownership from like 54% to 70-some%, an extra 14 points. Well, what happens to a pendulum?
It swings
It
out.
always comes back, right?
Always.
So when the foreclosure wave hit, it didn't drop back down to the home ownership rate dropped down to 40%. But who was losing the houses? Pretty much everybody who shouldn't have had a house in the first place lost theirs.
Yeah.
And the historical 2% that for one reason or another lose their houses.
Yeah.
There was not some massive implosion of the housing market. The mortgage loss rate, the foreclosure rate in this country at its absolute worst was 12%. That means 88% of the people who got houses are still figuring out a way to pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
What did that 12% really comprise? It was the 2% who historically, and the 10% who never should have had a house in the first. It was always going to be a blip. Yeah. It took us 3 or 4 years. It took us from like 2005. I think when's the first subprime mortgage hit the street? Maybe 2004.
Yeah.
So it took us 4 years to pump all of this money and all these toxic loans and all these bad deals in, and it took us another 4 to maybe 6 to 8, depending on what part of the country. But it's going to be another 4 to 6 to work it out. The mortgage crisis hit 2008. It started 2007, but really hit the fan 2008 when what's his name, the Secretary of the Treasury, walked down to Capitol Hill and said, give us $umpteen billion or the whole U.S. economy is going to cease to exist, right? But it took us basically from about 2008 to roughly about maybe 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
That was to be expected. But all the news media is talking about the world's coming to an end. The world was not coming to an end. We were working our way through that ridiculous amount of houses that were sold and mortgages that were created that never should have been created in the first place. That's all that was. But most people don't recognize that.
I have a book.
Yeah.
That I'll find and send it to you. And it was written from one of the dudes at Lehman. It was either Lehman or Bear Stearns, one of the two. And it was the dude who created the concept of the mortgage.
Subprime mortgages?
Yeah, and he was talking about, he created it in a 2-bedroom apartment over a deli in Connecticut.
That sounds right.
I mean, that's where he lived, and he would come down into the deli and have like meetings.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's in one of my libraries somewhere.
Okay, yeah, when you find it, we can talk about it. But again, the whole point of that, of even saying that, is what caused the collapse last time is not, no one should assume that we're headed for a collapse this time because of what happened. Because the underlying, what's the word I'm looking for? The underlying facts on the ground are totally different.
Gotcha.
Totally different. We have now gone through an extended period of time. It's been a great economy for lots of reasons. One of which is we are still to some degree still recovering from the recession, and a lot of people delayed gratification. A lot of people delayed purchases on a lot of things. But the bottom line is this: the 2006, 2007, up until the 2008 collapse of the housing market was fueled by liar loans, subprime mortgages. In other words, it was fueled by toxic money and overbuilding. This time around, as we enter 2020, we are now starting to see the millennials enter a market where we are not overbuilding the housing supply by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you actually go and just do a Google study on home builders, builder sentiment surveys, home builders are the ones who've been holding back.
Yeah.
Home builders have been holding back because they're like, we're not sure. We don't want to see a repeat of 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And when the market collapsed in 2008, 2009, what were mortgages? Mortgages were 7-8%. What are mortgages today? 3-4%.
Yeah.
We got cheap money, a relatively modest supply that isn't creeping, and we got pent-up demand just because of where people are in the next phase of their life. That again, I think this is way more like the baby boomers entering the housing market back in the 1940s and 50s, or call it, post-Korean War, post-Vietnam War, with the VA benefits and the interstate highway system and the sort of mass migration of people out of the cities. This looks more like that than it looks like the market collapse of 2007 2007, 2008, 2009. Looks way more like that. And I think if you're going to be an investor and you're not sure what to do, play the biggest trend that's in front of you. Play that first. And then if you want to do the niche stuff, if you want to do the vulture stuff, and like I want to do the Airbnb, or maybe I want to make a run at buying some of these busted hotel deals and try to do something with those, absolutely. But play because the trend is going to go on for a while.
Yeah, keep that baseline.
And if you miss that trend,
yeah,
especially again, I'm very big on the whole Ron Popeil set it and forget it. Like if I can run around town over the next 2 years and buy 10 $300,000 houses, $350,000 houses for less than $350,000, put none of my own money into it, and use the rent payments to pay the mortgage, and maybe have a little extra to pay them down, so that I turn a 30-year mortgage into a 20-year mortgage, or a 30-year mortgage into a 15 by paying extra principal every month, and just sit and wait. In other words, plant myself an apple orchard. In 15 years, I got $7 million if I do it 10 times.
Yeah.
I got $3.5 million if I get lazy. If I get lazy, I only do it 5 times. I got $3.5 million. What if I do this 20? What if I do this 20 times in the next 2 years?
Yeah.
I got 14. And even if I'm wrong by a little bit,
right? So you're only end up with 10 million.
Yeah, 1 or 2 losses, right. 1 or 2 bad deals, 1 or 2 I overpay, pick the wrong 10. I'm looking at least 10 mil.
Yeah, makes sense.
I just think, again, to answer your question, what is Sherman looking at? That's because I'm playing the trend. Yeah. I'm not playing the tax treatment. I'm not trying to do what was the flavor du jour last year? I even got hyped up about it a little bit, the opportunity zones.
Yeah, op zone.
Right?
Yep.
Everybody's talking about opportunity zones, and then that was the hot thing, and then it wasn't the hot thing. I'm not playing that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm playing the trend that is as close to being able to play the baby boom trend 20, 30 years ago as you could possibly get, 50 years ago, right? I'm playing that game. That's a long term, but the trend is your friend. Yep. I'm not buying everything that comes across my desk, but if I can put together this next year 5 good deals that fit in that trend, and do it again next year, and do it again next year, and do it again next year, along with everything else I'm doing, I ought to be able to have somewhere between 10 and 20 houses over the next 3 or 4 years that all I have to do is wait for them to mature. That's what I'm saying.
Well, then let's do something together. That's all I got to say.
Sure.
You know, because I'm looking at 24 months going, I got to figure out something to do for 24 months.
Well, okay, so let's talk about, and I got to do a call real quick. Maybe we got to do one of these again soon and go pick up from here and go talk about, okay, now how do we do it?
Yeah.
So today we talked about why we're doing it. And I'm always big on the why is more important than the how.
Yeah.
Like everybody wants to come to me and go, well, Sherman, how do I buy a house and fix it up? And what does it mean in terms of
why do you want to do that?
Yeah. Why are you even bothering asking me the how when you haven't figured out the why? Why do you want to do this? I don't know. What is it Mike Tyson said? Everybody got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah. He said everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Every investor wants to get rich.
Yep.
And they're going to ask how to get rich without first answering the question, why do you want to be rich?
Or,
oh, by the way,
I would take it one step further and say, how do you define rich?
Hey, thank you. And oh, by the way, what is your definition of rich?
Yeah.
Right? Well, for me, it's I got enough money to pay bills. But as I look at how I want to retire and the style of life I want to have when I really am retired, right? I've sort of been in a semi-retired state for the past 5 years, but I'm still working.
Yeah.
What I'd really like is about $10,000 to $20,000 a month of extra cash rolling in every month that I don't have to do anything for. Well, geez, if I got 10 houses that are throwing off $1,000 a month positive cash flow, right? Then doesn't that give me that?
Yeah.
So that's my first definition of rich is having an extra 10 grand. Now, a lot of people say, well, apartments are better than houses. And I look at all the different options for real estate right now. And I'm like, right now, hotels are not easier
No.
Neighborhood shopping centers are not easier.
No.
Right? And I do like apartments, but I got a couple apartments, and sometimes they're not easier.
Right.
But single family houses, if you do them right, get the right tenants in them, they're not easy, but they're easier, especially if you got enough cash flow coming in to pay somebody else to manage the darn thing for you.
Yeah. And I've been focusing on, and we don't have enough time today to do this, but my focus is agricultural and farm properties.
Yeah. Do you still got that wind farm?
Yep.
All right. One Wednesdays we'll talk about that. Right.
Yep.
So if I look at what I know to be a fact, not what I read in some book because I've actually done it, what's in my definition easier, not necessarily somebody else. Like we talk to 100 investors, there may be somebody else who goes like, Sherman, why aren't you in self-storage? It's so much easier. And I haven't done it. Exactly. I don't know it. But amongst the things I've done, this can be easier if you do it right. So I look at that, and then I layer on top of that this trend of millennials coming back in the market for certain kinds of housing in certain kind of neighborhoods. And I match those two things up. I'm like, here's an opportunity, Scott, to have my cake and eat it too. In other words, here's a chance for me to get cash flow and in 15 years potentially have a property that doubles in value.
Yeah.
So why not focus on that? And once I get that underway, and like I said, I've done 4 deals in the past 8 weeks. So I'm now ready to start putting that on autopilot.
Yeah.
About another 6 months, I can probably take on another thing and still do this.
Yeah.
And so maybe in another 6 months, you and I can have that conversation about maybe it's time to look at some land parcels and package them up and broker them to people who want to do land deals, or, look at solar farms or wind farms. But this right now to me is sort of like, what's the old expression? Nothing's more powerful than an idea whose time has come. This is an idea whose time is right, because you're sort of on the front end of what I see as a 20-year trend.
Yeah.
And I just need to be active at this for like the next 3 or 4 years. And if I do this right over the next 3 or 4 years, my worst case scenario is I only buy 10 houses and I only have $10,000 a month coming in extra that I don't have coming in now. And if I'm willing to wait for 15 years and I buy them for $350, they're all going to be worth 700 15 years from now.
Right.
That's the downside of that strategy is not bad at all. And the people are like, well, Sherman, what if the house collapses? What if you get a bad tenant? Okay, good property manager, insurance policy.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you can play what if scenarios all day. Yeah. Exactly.
And chances are there's some kind of a risk management, risk mitigation strategy that will basically be a check to take care of it.
Yep.
Right. Sherman, what if the house burns down? I got insurance. What if you put a bad tenant in there? I evict them, right? and again, the best part of a sale is like there's only so much damage a tenant can do at a single family house that isn't covered by an insurance. If they burn it down, there's an insurance policy for that. Right. If they steal stuff, there's an insurance policy. If they stop paying rent, okay, a certain point in time that does become a problem, but you can boot them out. I mean, but there's an eviction moratorium. Yeah, but the eviction moratorium ultimately wears off. And you want to be the first guy in line when the sheriff's ready. Okay, who do I do this week, right? There are strategies for dealing with that stuff. Don't worry about the how. Focus on the why, because the how will take care of itself. Anyway, I've gone way too long.
No.
You asked a simple question. You should have got a simple answer, but you know me.
No, I mean, I know anytime I ask Sherman a question, be prepared for an hour and a half answer. I'm good with that. I love it. That's why I ask you questions.
Well, I'm glad you invited me to this, and we should probably do it again. And maybe next time we pick up on, here and just start talking about how to do this stuff and where to do this stuff and how to put these deals together. Because I think this trend, I think this is a nationwide trend. This is not a DC trend. This is not a French. This is a nationwide thing. And just like it's happening here, it's probably happening even more and even faster.
I got friends, everywhere. I got a friend from Colorado saying, dude, we can't keep stuff on the market.
Well, not only that, where you are, there's a whole lot of people who drank the Kool-Aid and moved to downtown Baltimore.
Yep.
And they loved what was happening at Harbor East, and they love what was happening in Canton, and they love what was happening in Federal Hill. And they're all sitting there going, what do you mean there's no Orioles games?
Yep.
What do you mean the bars and restaurants in Federal Hill are closed? What do you mean people are running around looting and burning stuff down? Let me get the hell out of here and go maybe to Towson.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
So that trend, and you know this from the commercial side, Baltimore is kind of 1/10 of the DC market.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's about right.
But even if it's 1/10, it's still the same trend.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe
numbers are just
yeah. So maybe you're not getting 200,000 people coming out of Baltimore. Maybe you're getting 20. Can you make some money off of 20,000 people coming out of Baltimore?
Exactly. It's a great point.
So anyway,
man, I'm gonna run.
Appreciate it.
As
you
always.
Did record this, right? As soon as you post it, give me the link so I can put it on my page.
All right, I'll do it.
2 CCIMs talk housing.
Exactly.
All right, dude. Appreciate you, man.
Be good.
Talk soon.
To you.
All right. Bye.